And we click the button. Hello, everybody. How's it
Hello,
going?
Chad. It's great to be
Should
with
say
you as always.
shalom.
Shalom chaverim. That means hello, friends
Shalom,
in
Habe.
Hebrew.
Okay. Yeah.
We
So,
got an
yeah, we are
exciting
now
weekend
live.
coming up. It's a
Yeah.
big weekend, Memorial Day. Lots of meat being
Yeah.
consumed.
Yeah. A lot of good sales. I wanted to
This
try
is
to get out. I noticed two of the stores one had like $8.95 for ribeyes, and they're just going to be like, choice grade or something, bone in. But they were $8.95, then a $3 digital coupon, limit five. And so it was $5.95 a pound.
that's phenomenal for choice.
And even
I'd
if it's
I'd buy all if I
Yeah,
could.
even if it's just that, it's still going to be good enough. And it could be, they say choice, but sometimes I've gotten there, then they switch it like, oh, well, that one is select, you know,
Ah,
but a
yeah,
ribeye is still a ribeye. So as long as
yes,
I can pick out which ones have a good cap, I'm
yeah.
usually okay with that
You still making
kind of
lots of
thing.
bone broth?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
And I actually have almost enough bones to do another batch, you know.
Fantastic.
And
Yeah,
today,
I
I think today is going to be a fasting day for me
nice,
because I've just been
nice.
busy and it's already like, I kind of wanted to because I'm trying to jumpstart myself back into this. This almost goes along with the sacrifice. And obviously, the sacrifice thing, we should hit that real quick on the title, is just that we have to make sacrifices. And it kind of fit with Memorial Day that these people gave the ultimate sacrifice for us and our
Mm,
freedoms, for our freedom from junk food, from our freedom from disease, for our freedom from all these things. We don't have to make as big a sacrifice as our soldiers did, who I have utmost respect for.
yeah,
But we have
yeah.
to make some sacrifice. If these guys can go to war and do these kind of things, and I say this from all countries that fight, because I think we're both like, it's an evil thing, but it's what man is. We live in a fallen world. Our faith teaches us that. We know that. And it's like, just make the sacrifice, just,
Mm.
okay, I'm going to quit the ice cream. I'm going to quit all this junk. I can have carnivore ice cream and I can have some, if you got to have the carnivore junk, pork rind, sour cream, everything else, and just
Yeah.
make it and heal.
I totally agree. And I love that connection
Yeah.
you just made between sacrifice and freedom. The truth is,
Yeah.
this is on a broader level, soldiers make a sacrifice so we can live in freedom. And on a very micro level, as carnivores, we make certain
Yeah.
sacrifices. We don't have that ice cream, but we enjoy freedom from addictions, from
Yeah.
those addictions that imprison you. And in Judaism, you have the holiday at Passover, which is all about freedom. And one of the things that frees us from is those addictions, the narrow places. Addiction is it traps us.
Yeah. And obviously,
Very
if
powerful.
anybody's watching, where are you from? I know this was such a short notice. Evan and I have been wanting to do this, and we're going to try to, I think, do this like every week, is what
Yeah.
we've been talking about. And it was one of those things that creating YouTube, it's tough because it's like a lot of times they say you just got to hit record, put it out. And we
Hmm.
just kind of got this going. We've been talking about it, but it's actually happening.
It's happening.
So
And
we'll get
it's
more
about
viewers as we go along.
that connection between the carnivore way of eating, and faith and spirituality. And
Yeah.
on the surface, they may not seem connected, although I know many of my viewers are people of faith and many are not, but we
Yeah.
all we all have some sort of faith. And the truth is, carnivore gives you a sense of freedom to be who we really are. And I believe deep down that every person is a spiritual being and a physical being. And
Hmm.
in some ways, when you're carnivore, you can listen to that spiritual part inside of you. And not no one's really talking about that. You and I feel that, Chad, a lot, but
Yeah.
I think it can awaken a lot of people.
I think sometimes, and I don't know, this is maybe just me thinking this, a lot of the carnivore people are willing to do whatever it takes. They're willing to step outside the norm of what they're told. They're willing to say, okay, I'm going to look at this and try this with my own experience. And that's
Mm,
like our faith. We have this experience and these things that we know within. We can't prove God exists.
No.
but we have all this evidence that he
Mm.
does. And when we look at history, he's all through that history. I mean, he actually, King David was there. They're finding more and more of this stuff.
Yes.
And like when they look at the excavations of even like some of the areas around Israel, it's what, something like only 3% have actually been excavated and actually studied. And yet
Yeah.
all these things that are there are there. And then when we look at our history, and obviously I'm a creationist, you're going to be a creationist, we don't believe we came from mud guppies or whatever, but early man, we have this history of like cave painting walls. We know what they ate. We know these older bones when we check out what they have, that they ate meat. They ate these things. We know at the times, 3,000 years ago when Egyptians came in and they started doing more grains and stuff, it's like that. Like I had a guy bring up Daniel's fast on me to try to prove that we're supposed, and I'm like,
Oh, I get this all the
that
time.
that has nothing to do with it. I go, that has nothing to do with us now being healthy, eating meat. Oh, well, Daniel's fast. I go, look, why did he fast? He fasted 2 times. One was to avoid the sacrificial meat, purely for that. And it even says in the one thing, I think it's like in verse 12 or something, for I went from the tasty meat or something. He even says, like, I went from the good quality stuff to avoid this. So I actually took a penalty to do this because he was doing it for a reason. And then his other one, again, was for a set reason. It wasn't because this is the ultimate healthy thing. There was a lot of that controversy of sacrificed meat and being able to be okay with it,
Yeah. I think
which,
this concept of sacrifice is so central to the Bible. I mean, you look at the entire book of
yeah,
Leviticus is all about the sacrificial offerings, and they offered animals. They offered uh, cows and lambs because those were the most valuable commodity. You didn't bring
yeah,
junk to God. You what was most precious to you. And so we know that, I mean, Abraham was a herdsman. Abraham loved meat. I mean, when the angels of God visited him in the book of Genesis, what does Abraham serve them? Meat and cheese. That's what you
yeah.
serve, divine emissaries. No question. This is the proper human diet, as the Bible intended it. Yes, in an ideal world, somebody was talking to me about this the other day. So they ate plants and vegetables in the Garden of Eden. Well, yes, the Garden of Eden is a utopian sort of idea, at least from a Jewish
Yeah.
perspective. It's not the real world. In the real world, meat in a perfect world, there'd be no killing, there'd be no prey and predator, but that's not the world we live in.
And at that point too, lions weren't going to be eating other things. And it was like you said, like, but that got thrown out the window with a bite of an apple,
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So it's kind of
Yeah.
like, and you look at Cain and Abel, and the first murder, it was over a poor sacrifice. When I look up in the Strongs, which translates, you know what I mean, the
Yeah.
Bible verse
Yeah.
stuff, it's like you look at fat and the fatty meats that they always mention. A lot of times it is like you will serve this fatty meat. They knew there was value in that. And like you said, those value of those things, you know, one of the bro- one of the brothers didn't bring such a good sacrifice,
That's right.
and this is how it all started. So if you want to, and I don't like ever reading anything in the Bible. I almost like
Right.
counteracting it with the same thing
Yes.
because you can take it both ways, and that's not what it's about. But it's interesting that throughout our time and and again in history, and you look at even people from not too long ago, like in that Lewis and Clark video I did, where when they would kill lean buffalo, it's like they
Yeah.
just took the tongue and the marrow bone, and that was it because it was like they didn't want the lean meat. We know about rabbit poisoning from too lean a meat or not quality meat. So it is
Yeah.
true that there's something to this. We're on the right side of history.
No question. I mean, and I think that's part of our intuitive human wisdom. I saw a video, I forget, it was like a viral video of somebody was vegan and then had their first taste of meat in years, and just like the
Hmm.
utter ecstasy that came over her. And I think there is something intuitive and powerful about this,
Yeah,
that's clarifying. Um,
yeah,
but I wonder if people are watching, what kind of sacrifices you've
yeah.
made, to I mean, it could be in general just
Even just
sacrifices, but also as carnivores.
what have you given up that you didn't want to? I guess.
Yeah. It's
Also,
all
where
I
you're
mean,
from, what you're eating today. get a little
I
bit
mean,
alive here.
I got to think. I've got to me one of the things that I gave up. I used to love going to five. I mean, I've always loved burgers. I've always loved meat. But when I wasn't carnivore, I would go to Five Guys and get some burgers and fries. And now I still go to Five Guys because there's one right by my house and I love their meat. But fries, that's a
Have to
sacrifice.
go. I've only eaten there once, and somebody said I have to eat there because I've never been an eat out type person at all.
Yeah.
I've always enjoyed having my own meal. It's really
No,
funny how I've never been a go out kind of person at all.
even when you were total standard American
Even when,
diet.
yeah, even
Yeah.
when I just didn't really like going out. I mean, I would go out because it's there, and you have to eat 3 times a day on the standard American diet. So I would get something from like In and Out or something. And not that I didn't like it, but I would always think, oh man, I can just go buy this stuff and make it cheaper and make it better. Because I was
Yeah.
a foodie that liked quality over, you know. And I think it gets back to, I've heard you talk about it, and I know you've heard me talk about it, is that this is a hard habit to break. This is a hard mental journey to fight. These are things that we do. I think both of us agree. Eating meat
Mm.
for, let's say, 95% of the people is easy. You just eat the meat, and that's all there is to it. It's the boredom that gets you, or it's the, oh, I did love my French fries. And that's where that sacrifice comes in. You've got to say no to that and kind of get through it. And I think the mental struggle is bigger than people give it credit for.
No question. We are biased because we're, speaking to a lot of people that are already carnivores, but I know a lot of people, probably 90, 95% can't sustain this way of eating. I mean, I think that's typical with most diets. It's like 95%
Yeah.
of people. And I think it's probably pretty close. I mean, maybe at best it's 80%, it's like the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
80% aren't going to make it, but it is very hard, I mean, and especially at the beginning. Once you get through that hurdle, it becomes easier. Like anything in life, if you go for a run, the first mile is like the hardest mile, and then maybe if you're doing a whole
Yeah.
marathon, the end's going to be, but the first mile, once you get through that, you get the momentum to keep going. And that's the same with the carnivore diet.
Yeah. And it's easy to fall off. It's easy just to, not have something happen. And you do have to just toughen up sometimes and just say,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to do this. There's just that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say? You just got to lay it down
Totally.
sometimes and make it happen.
I want to,
Otherwise,
this
you
is,
don't.
we didn't plan on talking about this, but we're talking about sacrifice. And I know you talked about it on your channel, but your dad passing away. I mean,
Yeah.
think of all the sacrifices we make as parents, that
Yeah.
that is the ultimate, but we make sacrifices for things and people we love, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's, all the time that goes into parenting, all the money, all the heartache and the stress. We sacrifice for things that are important to us,
Yeah.
and if health and happiness and freedom are important to us, then we can make sacrifices for the carnivore diet.
And this is
Oh, that's a
actually my
good one.
wife.
You didn't have to tell everybody that. We could be like, "Oh, we're
No,
getting married. We're
I do though. I do though,
getting."
because I know there's sometimes the spouse will come on. I think that's the
It's a
spiritual
really good
benefits of
question.
fasting. And I
Oh,
mentioned the fasting
tremendous.
even that I was going to be doing and why I don't make like, oh, I'm going to be fasting. Because, it says right in the Bible, you don't boast about it either.
Yeah.
Just, it's a thing I'm kind of doing. And I know I've been trying to do more of it. So, what are your thoughts on that spiritual benefit?
Huge, huge. I mean, I've not done extended fasts. I think the longest I've done was 48 hours. I mean, I guess that is, I mean, and that was
That's a pretty good.
primarily, it was good. And it was, but it was primarily because I was sick, and so it was sort of involuntary to a degree. But when I mostly do one meal a day, so I'm doing 24 hours, and I do find myself there's a certain clarity. There's a certain clarity that comes in. Um, and even you actually get it more after 24 hours. Um,
Hmm.
there's an idea that you don't have to rely on outside forces and outside external stimulation. that there is a certain kind of power within us that is that's sustained by an invisible spirit. It doesn't need constant nourishment. So it is there is I think a feeling. Emptiness is a word I use, but that has such a negative connotation. I don't mean it in a negative way. I almost mean it in a very positive way. That empty except for the spirit,
Yeah.
and that can lift us up. So
Void
I
void
find
of
it very
distractions is a good
yes.
void of distractions.
I like that phrasing. What about you?
You're focused. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the hardest part for me when I do them, I do OMAD, so I'm pretty much always doing that.
Hmm.
And the first day is hard. Like today, if I do this fast, it's going to be hard for the first day because I'm used to, you're just used to putting food in your face and eating. That's just the flat out. Even on carnivore, it'll be like 2 pounds of meat, but you're used to it every 24 hours. And there's a
Mm.
bit of habit there, I think, too. There's a bit of the prep, a bit of the making, whatever else. But once I've noticed I get to that next day, I feel amazing. I just have this amazing sensation and this amazing feel of like clarity. It's almost like I'm even that much more awake and I'm that much more hyper aware. So I do
Yeah.
love it. It's just that first day is
It's hard.
I find it hard to get through. And then I've done a couple and I'm going to be doing more. I'm trying to kind of work up to doing them every week right now for a bit
It's
to
great.
kind of get back on track because like I mentioned, I gained so much weight with my dad, passing and then my friend passing and stuff like that. And after my friend passed here this last Friday, I actually went back up 7 pounds again. And
Really?
I'm eating the same thing and I kept the same
So
exactly
it's
what
the
I've been
stress.
testing and doing.
It's
Just
100% the
stress and
stress.
cortisol and stuff like that. Yeah. And
Wow.
I love my friends that I have, but it's also like sometimes it's upsetting because it didn't need to happen, you know? This could have been changed, but it was like, oh, well, this is hard because of the way I work, or this is hard because of what I'm doing. And I made those excuses until I was 57. So I'm not putting that on anybody, you know? We've all made
Yeah.
those excuses forever, and I did it. I made excuses for coffee for 2 years into my carnivore journey, 3 years total, including the keto, which was mostly meat and nuts. And it's like it has to
Yeah.
come. It's like our faith. It has to come from within. You know,
Yeah.
we can have faith. Doesn't mean our kids are going to have faith and they live with us. Doesn't mean our
Right.
kids are going to be carnivore. Doesn't mean our parents are going to go, oh, okay, well, I'm going to go carnivore because my kids are.
Yeah.
You can turn to faith and your parents cannot be a faith. I think that's some of the relationship that this carnivore journey is like faith. It's something that we have that we know deep down within. And once we start doing it, we know it's real.
Yeah.
The outwardly appearance, how people are, the spiritual side, the mental side, the stability, and just this calmness become real.
There's no question. I mean, I think that clarity is a big piece. And I think that does connect with fasting and carnivore. I mean, Dr. Chafee talks about how, he's not a huge proponent of fasting. He's not an opponent of it, but he, basically says when you are eating as a carnivore, you are in the same metabolic sense condition as being fasted. And to me, there is some truth to that. And one of the great gifts of fasting and of the carnivore diet is the clarity. I was talking with, I did an interview with Emily Penton yesterday. I haven't released it yet, but she's great. She has this coaching program called Inner Clarity Systems, and she's a carnivore. And there is clarity is one of her big explanations. And she had a great definition of it. It's something like something minus clarity is something minus contamination. And the foods that we eat, if we're not eating the proper human foods, they contaminate our brain, both sort of physically and brain fog.
Yeah.
And when you are in the right state of mind, there is clarity. It's like if you're a person of faith and you listen for God, when you're in a bad state of things, that message can be muddled. You want to, God
Yeah.
doesn't change our hearing. Our hearing has to be ready. It's almost like the divine human partnership. We have to be ready to hear that message. Now, hopefully, you know, God can sometimes break through the barriers that we have, but it'd be better if we could get rid of those barriers. And I think
Yeah.
our the brain fog is one of those barriers that we have that carnivore really helps with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Rita was saying this. We can obviously all read this, but yeah, I didn't do it. My wife did, but she had some medical things in the background, that she wanted to and stuff. And I have another friend that did, and we've talked about it. And I think and it's just so polarized anymore. I think
Mm,
that's what the bottom line is. You
mm.
look at that. I think all of us saw that crazy little cow horn vegan with Sean Baker in the last couple of days. You know, I would just say to her, explain rodenticides and how you are okay with killing animals by making them bleed out to death over 3 or 4 days and torturing them and their babies. Just explain rodenticides and how they work in agriculture.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear their response because they would just come up with some other thing.
Yeah. There's a
And
guy
that polarization is what's happening too much.
There's an amazing book. I think everyone should read it. It was life-changing. Well, it wasn't life-changing. I'd already become a carnivore when I read it, but the way she writes it and presents it, it's called The Vegetarian Myth by Lierre Keith.
Mm,
And she was a major activist, a vegan activist and sort of a feminist activist. And she still is a feminist activist. She's on the liberal political side for, but the way she demolishes the morality argument that vegans and
yeah,
vegetarians make, it is so powerful. The amount of death caused by monocropping is huge. And the truth is,
insane.
we didn't scientists didn't know about this until a few decades ago, because the stronger microscopes, you see how much life is under the soil, real life organisms living. People didn't know that 100 years ago. And so
Yeah,
the death caused by, and who's to say what form of
yeah.
life is better than another? That's
Well,
that you're, in a sense, you are making your own moral argument. And
yeah,
who's to say that's superior or not?
you are playing God. You are deciding
Well
what
said.
what level
Well said.
it's okay to kill everything for. So bunnies and below, perfectly okay to kill.
Right.
That's
Right.
and you look at, and I've heard the number around 3 trillion sentient beings. If you've heard that number too, are
No,
killed
oh
in
no, it
monocropping.
makes sense. Makes sense
You
though.
know, and because when you think of it, like there was a thing from the Audubon Society, and it was through I think like North Carolina or something, where it was something like 70 million birds in the US are killed because they eat poisoned insects and
Mm,
have other agricultural thing, but poison insects were one of the major things.
yeah.
And it's like the sheer number of bees for the almond harvest in California is just insane, and they work them literally to death. So they raise them and use them, and that is a bee's thing. So I don't, you know what I mean? That is a bee's idea. So they're raising these bees just strictly to do these almond things, and these hives travel around. It's like, yes, our cows are raised for us to eat,
Right.
so are the meat lambs that I eat. And this is why we have farmed fish that I won't eat because it's fed dog food, basically.
Yeah.
But it's
It-
like you guys are doing it with the bees for your almond milk and your nut milks. So you
yeah.
think a bee's life is no different than a cow's, but yet you take the side that it's not because it fits your agenda.
Oh yeah.
That's
They
how I
seize
try
the
to
moral
usually,
high ground.
yeah, I debunk. But to
That's
Rita's
good.
thing too, if the fact that she was an MD and given leeway, but once I became carnivore, I was ditched. I did get the vid, as I call it, you know, early on, and I was already 1 year into carnivore when this whole chaos started. So I was already 1 year in, and I'll have 2 bites of whatever my family's having for their birthday. So like I'll have 2 bites of my kid's cake, or like I'll have 2 bites of my wife's whatever she's having. And I remember I tasted it and I was like, I can't taste it. And I was just like, I can't taste this.
Mm,
So I told my
mm,
boy, I'm like, hey, Sawyer, go get the vinegar. And I just, I couldn't even smell the vinegar. It did
yeah.
nothing to me. And I was like, yeah, I know what this is. So, and it was on a Friday. Yeah, it was on a Friday. And so it was too late to basically get in. But it felt like Saturday when I woke up that I did yard work. It just kind of felt like, okay, I could feel my arms, but they weren't sore like a bad workout. It was just like I did good work. And then the
Yeah.
next day were my legs. And then when I went in for the test, everything was back to normal. And when I talked to the doctor and I said, yeah, these are my symptoms, these are the, stuff. And can I get Qvar 80 and albuterol? I'd like that cocktail because I do know medical stuff because I have a background a little bit in it. Not a medical guy or anything, but I did EMS work. And also, I had so many lung problems in the Hawaiian Islands. I knew that would be good for my lungs. And I was scared about my lungs because that's why I moved to the mainland, was a lung issue. So I knew these certain things that worked. And I asked for that. And then I asked for ivermectin.
How did
I
that
might as
go?
well ask for his firstborn child
Yeah.
to be like, or something. And it was like, he just looked at me like, what, I go, look, I used to live in Central America. Ivermectin's like OTC down there. You can
Yep.
get this stuff everywhere. Oh no, that's, just garbage and stuff like that. And he's like, well, I just don't understand how you say you have this. Cause you don't you don't talk like you've got this thing. And I was like, whatever I was, 57, I guess, at the time when I had it. And he's like, you have no symptoms and you don't, and I go, well, I just got done with the test. I did one of the little drive-through tests at the drugstore, and yeah, I'm definitely positive. So this is why I'm calling you, because I just want to kind of see about getting this because I am worried about my lungs. Well, and he was still kind of baffled. And the second he asked me, like, well, what's your diet like? And I said, well, I just eat
Uh-oh.
meat. And then it was like asking for ivermectin put the fact that I was crazy in his head, kind of
This
like
is
with
awesome.
Rita. And then the second I said I'm carnivore, it kind of like drove that nail with a finishing sink
This
that
is my
I'm
favorite
a
story you've ever told,
nutcase.
Chad.
And he was just like, well, I just, this is stupid. Why would you be doing this to yourself? And he actually said, and I should have taken him up on it, but he's like, well, I'd like to run some tests on you because there's no way you can do this. And at the time it was just so chaotic. I said, well, if you want me to come in, well, it'd have to be late. And we never did but I almost wish I could have gone in and done a bunch of testing because he probably would have been blown away and he could have been a convert. Or he could have, dug
Doctors.
his heels in more. But he was really like, telling me I have got to stop this right this second,
Yeah.
and I was like, dude, I was like,
The chance of
when
that
I quit
happening
weighing
is
myself
zero.
at 275 and I
Yeah.
was like, I know in that 3 range, and look at me now, I'm not that.
Well, my doctor just
Did you?
freaked out because my LDL is like in the upper 300s. I mean, it's high. I think I'm a lean mass hyperresponder. And
Yeah.
he thought there was something wrong, like the lab must have had like a flaw, like there was some test flaw. I'm like, no, I think this is right. And he's like, well, you need to get that calcium, whatever that calcium bone density test, which is fine because I've done it
Yeah. A
before and it was
CAC,
perfect
a
score.
CAC.
CAC, yeah. Which I'm like,
Yeah.
fine, I said to him, I said straight out though, there is absolutely zero chance that I will ever take a statin. So we can just take that off the table. I'm like, you can be worried. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job, but there's zero chance that I'm doing that. And because my HDL was way up too, and my triglycerides were down. Like, so everything was
Yeah.
so incredible except for the high LDL, which I was happy about. I'm pro cholesterol. People with high cholesterol live longer. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what the most recent studies say.
Yeah. I'll say
Yeah,
a
we
quick
have.
shout out to Beth.
Hey,
Hello, Beth.
Beth.
Anybody else too out there? If you got curiosities, questions, things about this, what have you given up? We were asking this earlier. What have
We could
you
call this "Ask a Rabbi
ki-
and a Minimalist." Like that's a kind of
minimalist? Yeah.
it's a
Well, it's
clever
good
name.
because, like with your faith and my faith, I mean, this is
Yeah.
where, we're not going to agree on certain things,
No.
but we're still both very, like I said, we have the one common God, you know, in
No, what
common.
we
And
should talk about, you mentioned it
and it
earlier.
shows that commonalities. But I don't think the Jews and the Christians, for the most part, don't get along. I think it's always that thing, where some other religions do, but also at the same point where it is a deep driving thing for you. You're a rabbi. You're not just like, oh, I'm just a Jewish guy that, and like, I'm probably a pretty devout Christian. I work at the church and I do stuff there, volunteer,
I
and
know
I'm
you
very
are.
strong and all that stuff. But it shows that, like, it doesn't matter. God doesn't. I think this is good also for you to say and me to say from my Christian perspective. God's not worried about what you eat. He wants you to be healthy. He wants you to be good. But he's not like, oh, well, you're a vegan and he doesn't care about that. He cares that you worship him, obey, be a good person. You know what I mean? Spread the word. What's your say on
100%.
that?
I agree with you. I think God invites us into proper human diet, into grace and gratitude, but God gives us free will also, of course, and God accepts us as we are. I think there's no question. I find carnivores to be the most compassionate people. Vegan. I often think about this. Not that I don't want to demonize anybody, but I'm going to anyways.
Yeah.
That
Oh, it's fun to poke. It's fun to
it
poke.
is fun. And a vegan, if you were to go to a vegan's house for dinner, they would probably harangue you. But if I had a vegan to my house, I'd be perfectly respectful,
Yeah.
and compassionate and understanding. I think, and maybe that's just the way nutrition affects the brain, but I find carnivores to be not dogma. I mean, we can be dogmatic
There's a
and
few that
strict in
are,
our
but
own.
not very many.
Yes, you're
Yeah.
right. Right. But there is a compassion and a calmness. That to me is
Yeah.
I did a video, it was one of my most popular on sort of the carnivore calm. And I do think
Yeah.
there is
Oh, there
something
is.
there. Yeah. Well, you're already a
Well,
mellow guy. I mean, you're from Hawaii, so you kind
yeah.
of have to be mellow.
I know I've had a few people leave in the comments like, "Oh, he's so dry," and it's like, well, that's just me and what you're gonna get. I'm
Yeah.
I'm maybe a little more animated, but I'm just kind of that, step by step factual kind of take it. But I
This
think
has
too,
nothing
like
to
the
do with
plant,
sacrifice. But why are people in Hawaii just more mellow? Is it just growing up on the beach and the beauty?
I think a lot of it's that, and things don't move. But you got to still show up for work, like when you work on the boats early. But I think a
Yeah.
lot of it's that, like, oh, surf's up, I'm not going to show up for work.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and people are just kind of okay. And it's like we used to have to get our car inspected every year there.
Uh-huh.
And so you go into the inspection, and if the two guys are talking story or just chatting, whatever you want to call it, like, the two guys working, you just kind of sit there in your car and you don't say, oh, excuse me, I'm here, because they know what you're there for if you pull up and just sit there.
Right.
And
Nobody's
you
in a
got to let
rush.
them do their thing. Otherwise, it's going to backfire on you and it's going to be even longer of a wait. So I
That's
think it's
interesting.
just, the warm weather, things are always kind of nice. It's not like anything goes anywhere or does anything. There's
Right.
nothing that happens.
Even the big
And the
city,
interest
even Honolulu has that laid back
that
feel.
that might be a little bit more busy. I was there when
Yeah.
I was younger and stuff like that. My
Right.
cousin lived there, and had a different viewpoint than me on Maui in the Big Island when I was younger. But it's like, um, also there's this, like when I moved to the Caribbean and I lived there for a year. And I lived on the mainland before I lived on Maui too, because I grew up in a pretty blessed life with my dad as a pilot.
Right.
And but when I moved there compared with when I moved to here, when I was, older and stuff like that, I had more in common with the Caribs when I moved there because they have that island attitude. And
Right.
the funny thing is, like here, I talk to my neighbors all the time. When people are out walking, I'm out working on the trees. I stop, I talk to them. When I'm out hiking the hill, I'll stop and talk to people. In the islands, if it's like, hey man, we're going to the beach,
Yeah.
hey Thursday, show up, and they're like, okay, you show up Thursday. You don't hold them
Yeah.
up. You don't say, oh yeah, okay, and then not show. Everybody on the
Right.
mainland, like, hey, let's do something Thursday, okay, and it doesn't happen. That's never happens there. So
That's
there's this
interesting.
very distinction of like, oh, you want to catch a movie Friday? And it's like, yeah, that sounds good. You make sure it happens. And the same thing in the Caribbean, like, these guys were like, oh, hey, because they knew us, the, new tourist guy, whatever, they called us, but they kind of knew we're dive guys there. So we're kind of just above tourists,
Right.
which I can relate to being in the islands, how you treat people. And it's like, they're like, hey man, we heard you like fishing raw, so like, let's go, we're going to go Wednesday, come down
Right.
and we'll take you fishing where we go. And
And
that's
if you
cool
agree,
because
you
they're
better show
inviting you
up.
into their life. Yeah. And so it
Right.
was like, I was ready to go, and they were like, oh, cool, cool. Yeah. Like most of you guys don't show up, and it's
It's
like, well,
interesting.
I'm not from, I came from the island. So I think I already have that thing like, yeah, I'm going to take you up on that offer. And
And
I only mainly
surfers can
hung
be
out with
se
locals.
and surfers can be serious guys. I mean, that's not easy. You have to be sort of
No.
disciplined to be a
Yeah.
surfer, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Turn up
oh,
my
we getting
mic a
some
little. Is
nice.
my mic a little quiet?
Yeah, that's better. Or I just may be
Is this
allowed
better
now.
now? No, it could be that. I appreciate though the feedback too on that. So I'll see if this is a little better. Daniel can let me know. I had problems with my mic before on here on the StreamYard with the thing. I'm going to look at my audio level and see that real quickly. Sometimes it's hard when we're like talking because you don't really know what your level is until you watch it
Right.
live.
Yeah.
So let me know if this is any better, Daniel, and I'll make that point to. I know
Anyone
where
doing
I'm at. I
anything
know where to
special
turn it down.
for Memorial Day? Anyone have special plans? I don't, but actually Monday is my birthday. So
Oh,
yeah. So
happy
it's a
birthday!
fun day. Thank you. So we're gonna go. My parents live in Milwaukee, so we're gonna go down and have dinner with them and celebrate, which is nice. Um, and so probably cook out. My mom has a great grill, and I don't know where she gets the best meat. I don't know how. I guess I went with her once to where she gets it, but she somehow always gets the perfect cut. So uh, we're gonna do some burgers, which will be great.
That's awesome. So,
Yeah,
so do you want to share your years of living on this planet?
46. I was born in
Nice.
1978. Yeah, so it's so I guess it's not a big one. 45 felt a little bigger. Um, so that but 46, full speed ahead.
Yeah. I think I don't know. My 40s just disappeared because I was in kind of a mess of a state, like when I was starting to get sick. My 30 was a big one. And my
Mm,
60 ended up not being a big one because I've been on carnivore through my 60th birthday. And I don't feel like I'm 60
no,
anymore. I'll be 61 in July.
you
And
don't
I
look
don't
it.
have that physical feeling. I don't think I look 60. I don't act 60. So to me, I was like, oh man,
You
60 is
could
just
pass for
like,
upper 40s, Chad. I mean, you could. You could
yeah.
pass like 48, 49, no
If I didn't
question.
have the gray, that
Yeah.
would probably help. But still, it's
Yeah.
interesting though, because that's the one thing that carnivore has brought me. And I think you and I talked about this before that it's like, because you've been at this, what, like 2 years plus,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's that long term thing. It really is just part of your life. It's
Huge.
not like this thing that you do anymore. It's just there.
That's
And I
so
think
true.
that
That's such
makes
a
a
good way to put it.
difference.
Yeah, that's such a good way to put it. I was just thinking, we're going to do some traveling this summer, some great traveling. But like, I remember when I used to travel, think, oh, what great restaurants you're going to go to, what foods you're going to try. Like none of that. Like I'm looking at other
Yeah.
stuff. It's not like we're not going to do anything, but it is. It's become part of life. So that's it's a good feeling. The other thing I was thinking about age. I've noticed that a lot of the people who sort of embrace carnivore diet are older. And I think that
Yeah.
has to do with, our bodies do, our when you're in your 20s and 30s or definitely teens, you can get away with eating crap. Like the body's just
Yeah.
it's young enough, it's vigorous enough. It just, doesn't matter all that much. But then at a certain point, probably often around age 40, things slow down and you have to y- you know
Yeah.
you have to take what you eat more seriously. I mean, I think it's better. I wish I'd been able to start this 20 years ago. But I'm grateful to have found it when I did, and I think that's true for a lot of people that you come to it later in life.
Yeah. I think too, with the age and more power to them. Like you said, I wish I found it when I was,
Yeah,
a 13 or something.
yeah.
When I was 20s through 30s, if I wanted to just doing natural stuff, I was always cutting weight. But if I wanted to cut, like if I was eating a bunch of junk, I could eat a ton of junk
Mhm,
and just
mhm.
do a little extra work and cut. My friends that were wrestlers could cut insane weight really fast, to
Mm,
get down to wrestling weight. And like you said, it's different for us that are over 40, over 50, over 60. I think each one of those steps, it's like, and again, I'm not trying to say anything wrong, but like, when some of these guys who are 30, like, oh, here's, this is really easy, just do this. It's like, that might be easy for you, but some of us with a slower metabolism, things, long-term career jobs, families, things, and everything else, sometimes it's just not as easy to do you know, to focus on it. And I think this is where we get back to this sacrifice. And you were talking about the parental sacrifice that we make for our kids. Sometimes it is hard because we have a lot more going on,
Mm.
you know, like me with 15 and a 20-year-old, she just turned 20. It's like there's just a lot going on. And you know, again, but the sacrifice you do for them comes back. So it's not like you know what I'm trying to say? It's not a bad sacrifice.
Absolute.
It's something
No.
that's easy to do because you love that. Where this one is a sacrifice in your own little how do I want to say, mini vacation? Maybe that donut is your mini vacation where you're like, oh,
Yeah.
this donut's just so good. And you know it's hurting you, but you're still okay doing it when you're like I was with muffins and, you know, I always called myself a pastatarian kind of thing, you know, and all the pastas, because I never was a vegetable eater anyway.
Right.
And it's that
Yeah.
little outlet and relief when you have that thing that you love, like fettuccine Alfredo or something. But
Yeah.
once you get away from that, those passing out on the couch after dinner or those aches and pains of waking up. And when I was like in my mid 50s and I would wake up and creak and crack coming
Mm.
down the stairs in the morning and my joints would be popping and I would be so sore.
Mm.
That
It was a
sacrifice
wake-up call.
that it's gone now, kick me in the
Worth it.
head. I wish I did it sooner.
Yeah. Yeah. We sacrifice for things we love. You know, I think that's and
Yeah.
so it really isn't a sacrifice. It's a giving. And through the giving, we don't for anything important requires sacrifice. I mean, love. When you love somebody, you sacrifice, you know, time you could be doing something elsewhere. I mean, that's life is in a sense because we're social beings, we're always making sacrifices. We can't be purely selfish. Um,
Yeah.
uh, I talk about that with when I have kids who have bar and bat mitzvahs, and you know they have to read from the Torah, and sometimes they have to read from the book of Leviticus, and they say to me, Rabbi, what am I supposed to talk about? Someone makes, you know, killing animals and dribbling their blood over the altar. I can't talk about this for my speech. I
Yeah.
say, okay, you don't have to. I say, talk about sacrifice and what I said. This is how sacrifices were made 2,000 years ago. But talk about the sacrifices people make today. And then they always get that, which is good.
Yeah. And it's one of those things with like, you know, Julie here, like 67 too, it's never too late. So even if you're
Awesome.
that kid that's having a hard time and at 67, I think sometimes that's hard because you're just so entrenched in your ways. You're so
Mm.
used to things for so long and you have such a huge history. Like I had such a long history of my espresso
Mhm.
that it was hard to give that up because it was like literally an identity because everybody knew me as this hardcore espresso nut that had like a commercial machine and did all this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
I think those people that have that, but this also shows it's, you know, obviously if she's coming back from tango and dancing
It's
and,
awesome.
you know, I'm sure she feels like a whole new person if she's been doing this from what she was. And that's the biggest thing.
It's fantastic. I
I
think
don't know. I think you and I are preaching to the choir in that sense, you know, with all the carnivore people, but anybody maybe outside watching this wondering, how many of you look at people? Here's an interesting one. I had a Bible study this morning and it starts early and it gets out about 8 o'clock. So as I was coming back, I go up this one side street just to kind of avoid going out on the main road. I saw this lady jogging who was definitely overweight by probably 40 plus pounds, you know, the real spare tire looking overweight. And then I saw another guy coming down the street who had the really big spare tire overweight thing on a bike. And you could tell he wasn't a happy guy, but he was doing it for exercise. And I
mm,
just had this almost like inner welling of, you know, you're
mm,
not going to cry, but you do your cry for them to just say, look, man, all it takes, you don't have to do all this. The exercise is good and you want to move, but you don't have to run, which isn't that comfortable if you're that overweight. And you don't have to bike, which isn't that comfortable if you're overweight. You could just be walking gently around the block with a dog or a friend or talking if you just ate properly.
that's right. That's
And
right.
then the movement will come. And then when you're back in shape, like me, I didn't go hiking this morning because of Bible study. I'll do something else, but I'm back to my hiking. I was off it for a while when all the
You
turmoil
got
was
to
over
do
my
more of
dad's
those
health.
videos of you in the mountain. I
Yeah.
love those videos. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll probably will. I like doing them. They're really funny from the YouTube analytics to hear the behind the scenes stories. I lose
Yeah.
like 2 or 3 subs every time I do one.
Oh,
Isn't that weird?
it is
But again,
weird.
are those the people, like we talked about it before with our religion? Either you're just going to accept this as who I am and I'm an outdoor guy, or
Right.
maybe those people were there for a message of like me being really concise, which is fine, if they wanted a
Yeah.
sub. But it is funny that happens. But yeah, so like I did my 3.5 mile hike yesterday and I was just like in heaven, man. I was just like, this is so good to be out.
Yeah.
Except it's getting hot here in Phoenix, so I think I'm going to move my wake up time to like 4:30 a.m.
Yeah. What's the temp? So right now, what time? Yeah. What's the temperature right now?
Right now it's not bad. Right now it's 2:15 my time and it's 93 degrees out.
Yeah. That's not bad for Phoenix. Yeah.
It's not bad, but it's still hot when you hike. You still
Oh,
end up
totally.
a sweaty mess, because I put a pack on my back. I'm always hiking with a pack, kind
You
of
can't, you
roughing it.
can't, you can't run outside when you're
Yeah.
there. Yeah. At that
It's
time of
it's
day.
when it's 110 to 120 that gets really brutal.
Yeah.
That's when it
Somebody
gets
asked,
really
I think it was
brutal.
Beth, have either of you ever tracked your blood glucose or ketones? Yes, I did when I was doing keto. I got one of those Keto Mojo things, um, and I liked it, but then I stopped on carnivore. I basically I don't do it anymore. I don't track. I can kind of tell now when I'm in ketosis,
Yeah.
you know, and it's not all the time on carnivore. It's especially unless you fast regularly. Like I find I am actually more in ketosis now because I'm doing one meal a day. Um, but uh, it's not like you're doing those fat bombs to get you into ketosis like you
Yeah.
occasionally do with keto.
And I
What
have
about
one
you,
of those
Chad?
keto mojos and I did it the same thing. I did it a bunch when I was in keto. I did it a
Yeah.
while back and I was going to do it. And then again, like, I got rug pulled with, life. But I thought about doing it again just for people so they can see, because when I do like glucose at 6:30 in the morning and I don't eat anything and I go on my hike and I come back from a good 3.5 mile hike, which I'm going to start upping to maybe about 5 miles and the weight, it's in a totally different position, totally radically different position. And the same thing if I, do it and I don't do my hike at say 9 o'clock because I'm going to do exercise that night that's different inside. It's in a totally, so it's just so all over the place. So the whole heat, lean mass, hyper responder thing of like, when are you working out? How much are you working out? You know, I just found it's not worth, but I'm going to do it again, I think, at some point just because it's a fun video and it'll
Yeah.
be interesting to see.
Somebody asked about evolution, and yeah, this may be somewhere where we have slightly differences. I mean, I think I believe there is evolution for sure.
Yeah.
That's my view. I, I also believe in the creation story, but the way I interpret the Bible, and this is a perfectly consistent with traditional Jewish interpretation, is that the days, a day in God's eyes is different than a day in human beings' eyes. And the Psalms talk about that, where it says, "A day for you is like 1,000 years, oh God." So the days to me represent phases of creation. They're not literal chronological time as we understand it. So I do think human beings, evolve out. I don't, I don't know. Truthfully, I don't think anybody does. It is a theory, but there's certainly human beings are different than what we were 2 million years ago. Although they ate meat 2 million
Yeah.
years ago too, so there is something there. But that's a good question. That's a big
It's a
topic,
big
and
question. Well,
sometimes it
like
creates a lot of tension among
nobody was
people.
there, so we really don't know.
Yeah,
And there's some pretty good evidence for things like the Grand Canyon and that it's actually way younger than they know. That it's
yeah,
actually really young, the Grand Canyon. Almost like, and again, if you think about it, if you had a pool and you were going to empty a pool and you lived on a
yeah,
slope and you drain the pool, you would have these steep canyons with a really big thing. And if after like the next year, all those things would be washed smooth. They wouldn't be steep.
Yeah.
And if you look at
Yeah.
like the Schnebly layer goes across multiple states and it's in different areas all across it, the same
Oh, that's
sedimentary
interesting.
layer. To me,
That's
like
interesting.
dinosaurs, when you look at them in fossilized form, and you have this fish out of this one dinosaur's mouth that was eating. And we know in nature, like me from being a big hunter, like if animals die out in nature, they get scavenged and ripped apart. They don't just lay there perfectly and slowly get covered over years and years. So to me, the whole flood experience is pretty well proven with the layer of
Yes.
dinosaurs.
Oh,
And
yeah.
biblically, dinosaurs and large creatures, the trunk of a cedar, are in that biblical sense. We also know that they have about 1,000 fossil like imprints of humans and dinosaurs mixing together, because there was some mud prints where there was like dinosaur prints, and then they literally have human prints that came along right after and made an impression into the dinosaur print mud. And there's like
Mm,
literally 1,000 of these things, and they don't want to show them. So with the
fascinating.
age, since none of us were there, some things fit. I think we've been around a long time. I do believe in, the creation, because this came from nothing. And the fact that they cannot even to this day mix a cat and a dog and make a cog, I
Mm,
guess you would call it, or whatever you want to call it, you can't even do that.
right.
But when people say, oh, we took all this time to go through evolution and change, and I believe we've changed, because we know even in the couple hundred years we've changed. Our natural height has changed and things, but we're still humans. We still have opposable thumbs and we do these things. So you say
Yeah.
we took millions of years, and yet give me a few months and I can give you a totally radical looking dog if I go get a dachshund and a German shepherd.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And here's this
fascinating.
totally radical different thing that's that, but it'll never be a cat. And there's never been any historical change of kind ever in
Right.
history.
Right.
Darwin's finches are still finches, like all this other stuff is still this other stuff. So there's definitely those species that just cannot cross. And in nature, if you had that, it would be there. And the law of nature decay, as dogs get more breeds from where the wolves were, that's like a decay, as these breeds, and some of these dogs kind of show it,
Mm,
how they're not quite capable like a wolf.
mm.
So I think, to me, that's kind of my proof. But again, this brings us back to the faith, where you have faith in what you have because you have no proof of that aspect. I have no proof of that aspect. We only have the evidence. And to me, the evidence shows, that there's somewhere in between of that. If you take, again, where all the fossil layers are, all the things all throughout time, all the biblical stuff matters, you know, and you do go back and there were records of people living a very long time in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
So,
that's fascinating stuff.
and
Yeah.
and, and as we've been breaking ourselves down, and it's a fallen world. So I think it just takes faith on both sides. That's
No
how I view
question.
it,
I mean, Moses
which is
lived
a
to
big
120.
philosophical deep dive for a carnivore video, but it's fun to do,
It is
you
fun
know.
to do. And there's no,
Yeah.
there is no other conversation like this happening in the carnivore community. This is why
No.
Chad and I wanted to do this.
And I
it-
don't
yeah,
it's like plant-based people. I don't care what you're eating. If you don't want to believe in that's I have no man, I still love you as a person that's a carnivore, and we have that in common.
yep,
And that should never
yeah,
get in the way of not, I
yeah,
guess. Again, I
100%.
hate the polarization, but I think a lot of us that are older did not grow up in this polarized society
Oh,
anymore.
yeah, I mean, I'm only 40. I'm going to be 46, but in the late 1990s, sure, there was Republican Democrat tension, but nothing like today. Nothing,
Yeah.
nothing. You always saw it on the, among in the big political issues, but not among families and communities. And now that's what we see. It's really horrible, you know.
Well,
Um,
enjoy it. I mean, like I said, I had one, used it. Evan had one, used it. It's fascinating stuff. It's interesting to make your mind twist of like, okay, how come this isn't, I thought I would be on better ketosis. I think it is an interesting thing to make you think. Some people do have to track. I think there are some people that want to track their stuff, want to write down the statistics and do it. And I think it's a fun experiment to find out if you're that kind of person.
Yeah. I'm not a
It's too
big
much work
tracker.
for me.
Yeah,
No,
I'm not
too
a big,
much
I
work.
never, even when I was a runner, I'm not a runner anymore, but I never tracked my time. I never, it just, it was more, I was doing it for the feeling less than the
Hmm.
sort of, even though I'm a competitive person generally and, always have been driven, but with running and certain things, never, never felt a need to track. Yeah. That's a
Yeah,
personality thing, I think.
it is. And
Yeah.
that's, my wife likes to make lists and cross things off. And I just, if it can't kind of float in here, it wasn't important enough to stay. And if it's important enough in here, it'll be there to do. Or sometimes it's like, oh, I forgot about that. And then I'm in trouble,
Yeah.
but so be it,
Yeah.
kind of thing,
Well, thanks everybody for for spending some time with us. This is fun.
Yeah.
This went better than I even thought it would. So it's just fun to just chat and talk a little spirit, see what comes up.
When did dinosaurs come into existence? See, and I honestly think dinosaurs definitely came in after and the flood. The flood to me explains it all. Why they're all fossils, all the sediment that they're buried in, why they're in such good preserved condition. To me, the global flood makes total sense when you really think of fossils, because this day and age, like again, anytime you're out in nature, animals that die are just riddled all over. They're just, most of them are blown up. All the few that do die and just kind of lay there and rot will not be in perfect shape. They won't have the same impressions from the sedimentary layers. That's at least my
Mm,
view. And the fact that
yeah.
they do have so many of these fossils that are like together with man and stuff.
These
And
are
there's just
interesting questions.
too many other factors. But that's again, you can think I'm crazy, you know. Yeah, in your
Michelle,
70s,
you're right.
even 60. It's
Yeah.
and you were talking about the vegan thing, and I think I have a friend that's plant-based, and he's in my Bible study, but he also does youth groups, and he's also, and bless you.
Thank you.
And he also is like one of the youth ministers, that does stuff. And we both talked about it. We're both after the same goal. We're both after getting healthy. I don't
Yeah.
think what he's doing is completely right. He doesn't think what I'm doing is completely right. The thing that I get him on is heme iron and vitamin B12. And you were talking about brain fog and that other gal. Well, B12 is a known thing for brain fog
Yes, yes,
and
yes, yes.
disorders. And so is heme iron, that's totally different than the standard iron, and a couple other, minerals and stuff. So just make it part of your thing and you would be complete.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I get it from this, I think it's like a fortified yeast or something like that, or some kind of yeast that they get their B12 from. And I go, but that's going to be a synthetic, or like, as you said, fortified. So it's not natural. So if you want to be natural, why not just, consume
Yeah.
it? And like, I won't. And like, I met another guy who was the same way. And he's like, oh, well, your cholesterol, you're this level, it shows all these problems. And I'm like, and amazing story. He survived cancer, got through cancer, had a miracle, all this stuff happened. And like I say, yeah, but you kind of got man boobs and a big old gut,
Yeah.
and you're younger than me. Why not just
Cereal.
try the
These
carnivore? Why not
fortified
just,
vitamins and minerals drive
yeah,
me
it's just
crazy.
just try it for 90 days. And people give
Yeah.
up this, and this gets back to our sacrifice. Oh no, I'm not gonna. I go, just look, I went plant-based. I know what it's like, and I know my experience. It might not be your experience, but I know it. I actually can speak from experience of trying it. I can speak from experience on keto, and I can speak from experience on paleo and these other things, And
Yeah.
it's one of those, just make that sacrifice for 90 days and do it, and then tell me how you feel,
Yeah.
because they won't. And it is funny how some people won't
Yeah.
change at all. And I'm like, what
I
have you
know.
got to lose? That's,
Yeah.
I'm curious if you people out there ever find that too, like with friends. Like, I
Yeah.
really don't have any friends that are carnivore,
Yeah.
because there's just so few people that are willing to do it, even after they see you have these incredible results. Oh, no way, that's crazy. It's
That's a
like,
good. Well, people don't change unless they're forced to, often by
yeah,
desperation. And most people, it's enough they can get by. Human beings are incredibly adaptable, even though we're not optimizing. If you're getting by and just okay, we don't know. In my work, I follow this sort of productivity system called Getting Things Done by David Allen, and he talks about how most people get used to a certain level of stress, and then when they implement his system, which I love, you suddenly feel true clarity and relaxation for the first time. And I think that same kind of logic applies to carnivore. We've gotten used to this certain level of brain fog and sort of fatigue, and my body's supposed to hurt a little bit. But then when we try carnivore and we actually feel like we're supposed to feel, it's unimaginably good. But you have to
Yeah.
experience it to know what it is.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
true. I would say, yeah, the fossil aren't scattered might support it could support that. My comeback to that would be things like the Schnebly layer. When you look into the Schnebly layer and how it goes across all these areas, and they have that same layer in other areas, that it would, if it went up in the atmosphere, came down, killed everything in this vast thing. But the depths of these layers and things like, again, the Grand Canyon actually showing that it's quite young by the way the decay is. And when you actually think about it, again, put a garden hose on a hill for 2 days and watch how steep and sharp those canyons are, and then let it sit there and come back next year, it's going to be all smooth.
Mm.
That this carving of the water going out, then just leave your hose for a trickle for a month on a decline hill on like a muddy bank, or a dirt bank, and watch it and compare that with, again, a year later and what happens. To me, there's just all these kind of like, oh yeah, that kind of makes common sense of where it is and the
Mm.
layers. But it could be, I have no doubt that, we've probably been hit by asteroids at some point
Mm.
through the thing.
I got to get going to get to synagogue. So I'm going to have to
Okay.
say goodbye to
Well,
everybody.
let's wrap it up then.
Yeah. Nice seeing you all. This is the first of many.
Yeah. Looking a bit starting to
Thanks everyone for sticking
that.
through with us.
Yeah, that is a tough one for Sandra there on that. That's what people have to have their why. So anyway,
Right.
we're gonna go ahead and say goodbye, or as I always say, a hui ho. We will see you soon.
Aloha.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming in and stopping in, and look for us next week.